やばいやばいやばいやばいやばい。これ本気でやばい。
Triggered tsunami warnings and 4-foot tsunami waves. This is the moment that the quake struck just a few hours ago.
A massive tsunami triggered by a raging earthquake in Japan is speeding toward the Russian city of Vladivostok. On January 1st, 2024, urgent alarms blared, warning residents about destructive waves approaching after a tremor measuring 7.6 magnitude on the Richter scale shook Japan's coast. Will years of emergency drills save them from nature's unpredictable fury? The countdown is on. How many lives hang in the balance? Get ready as we join the anxious people of Russia, confronting the tsunami, threatening to consume their cities after a resounding warning. Russia has been warned of a terrifying tsunami raging into their cities. On January 1st, 2024, a strong 7.6 magnitude earthquake hit off the eastern coast of Japan, causing tsunami warnings across the Pacific Ocean. In the Russian city of Vladivostok, located more than 600 miles away, initial feelings of safety turned into unease. Reports of extensive damage and waves hitting Japanese cities and villages raised fears that the disaster could affect distant communities. Vladivostok, initially spared, faced the potential of a humanitarian crisis as the day progressed. City officials closely monitored tsunami waves from Japan, recalling the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami that claimed over 230,000 lives. Warnings urged people to seek higher ground, and emergency teams prepared for the worst. Anxious urgency gripped the city as residents hurriedly gathered families and supplies. The usual activities in Vladivostok's harbors and markets gave way to vigilance as people sought updates. Despite warnings of waves reaching 10 feet or higher, many struggled to grasp the immense, unpredictable power approaching them. As night fell, an eerie quiet settled over the city. Officials kept watch as the population waited in shelters or elevated buildings. Amidst tension, people wondered what daybreak would reveal: devastation or relief, responding to the unexpected threat of a mega tsunami. Seismic alerts blared through Vladivostok's emergency channels, triggering disaster response protocols. While the idea of a tsunami hitting Russia's eastern coast seemed unlikely, officials relied on preparedness drills for guidance. Patrol vehicles with megaphones and sirens spread out, urging citizens to start evacuation procedures. Confusion and alarm spread as residents tried to make sense of the urgent but vague commands. Living in a seemingly secure harbor, far from earthquake-prone areas, people hesitated to believe in the threat of a mega tsunami. Civil defense personnel quickly guided nervous crowds to pre-arranged assembly areas. Police prioritized evacuating the most vulnerable: children, hospital patients, seniors, and people with disabilities. However, traffic congestion on major routes out of the city exceeded expectations. Officers redirected vehicles through lesser-known streets toward higher ground. Public transit and trains quickly filled up, and helicopters airlifted residents from coastal villages inaccessible due to traffic. Those on foot, heading inland for shelter and higher ground, were directed to reinforced public buildings. Makeshift facilities like schools and parking garages were used, but the sheer number of people overwhelmed efforts. Stockpiled food and water eased immediate needs, but might not be enough for a prolonged displacement. Emergency channels shared information, helping responders allocate resources to overflow shelters. As night fell, Vladivostok turned into a makeshift tent city, with displaced residents anxiously wondering what the next day would bring. The tsunami warning wasn't triggered out of nowhere. On the morning of January 2nd, Vladivostok's anxious citizens huddled in makeshift shelters and elevated buildings, glued to news reports detailing the extensive destruction caused by Japan's recent powerful earthquake. Despite being more than 600 miles away from the epicenter of Japan's Ishikawa prefecture, the intense 7.5 magnitude rupture left Vladivostok residents with a chilling sense of vulnerability. The earthquake had violently ruptured a section of the Hokuriku Konetsu Belt, a complex fault network on Honshu Island, at a shallow depth of 10 kilometers. The tectonic forces between the Eurasian and Amur plates, along with the North American and Okhotsk plates, produced frequent earthquakes. Japan's advanced quake-proofing measures, developed over centuries, were overwhelmed by the immense power of this offshore event. The shaking, amplified by the shallow rupture, caused buildings to collapse, roads to fracture, and infrastructure to fail across Japan's main island. Landslides added to the chaos, making it difficult to assess the full human toll amid overloaded communication networks. News reports depicted Japanese rescue teams working tirelessly, families separated by destruction, and entire hillsides affected by mudslides and severed rail lines. Japan's transportation minister estimated about 100 lives lost, with many more missing or injured in the hardest-hit prefectures. Vladivostok officials, witnessing Japan's unparalleled earthquake resilience crumble, felt a growing unease, recognizing their city's vulnerability to similar seismic waves. Despite their coastal installations and infrastructure lacking recent exposure to extreme tsunamis, they acknowledged the potential for heavy inundation damage. The situation intensified as seismic activity from Japan's ruptured fault lines led to the propagation of tsunami waves heading toward Russia. Vladivostok kept an anguished vigil, hoping the approaching tsunami might dissipate or redirect before reaching their shores. But they could only hope and pray. Russia's uneasy watch as Japan's earthquake threatens other distant horizons. The Russian authorities have been echoing the growing sense of dread as they closely monitored the advancing tsunami threat. According to Reuters, officials issued a tsunami warning for the western coast of Sakhalin Island, as well as the mainland Primorsk and Khabarovsk regions closest to Japan's Pacific coast, based on the latest impact models. Experts witnessing the heartbreaking loss caused by the magnitude 7.6 offshore earthquake in Japan anxiously monitored their own coastlines as the seismic waves raged through the Pacific coast. Their official responses were all guided with caution, urging all vessels near Vladivostok's harbors and fisheries to make emergency landfall due to this unpredictable tsunami threat. TASS press releases broadcasted the risk analysis, indicating that the projected wave heights and strengths might not be life-threatening for Russian coastal areas, possibly just over 3 meters at most. Currently, mass evacuations were limited to Japan, with Russian agencies choosing to closely monitor sea level fluctuations before considering transportation shutdowns or inland relocations. Inside shelters, reactions varied to the cautiously optimistic advisories downplaying the tsunami's destructive potential. Some citizens found solace in knowing that expert systems tracking the situation did not warrant widespread panic. However, others questioned the resilience of Russian infrastructure, wondering if it was truly more tsunami-resistant than Japan's renowned engineering defenses that had just failed against the recent earthquake. All eyes were glued to news and social media channels as the fate of two nations hung in the balance. Tsunami history along Russia's coastline. The fishing villagers along Russia's eastern shores once lived with little fear of tsunamis. Past generations built humble cottages along the rocky Kamchatka coastline, unaware of the violent seismic forces brewing offshore. Their ignorance ended one November morning in 1952, when violent tremors shook the peninsula's eastern flank. Horrified villagers watched a towering 15-meter wall of water peel back the sea, gathering fishing trawlers in its spray before surging inland. The monstrous waves bulldozed houses into splinters and scattered shrieking families like leaves in a storm. Entire villages were simply swept out to sea, lost to the turbulent ocean in minutes. In the aftermath, scientists studied why some towns were utterly annihilated while others barely flooded. They traced the tsunami's path back to a rupture along the peninsula's offshore fault lines. Like a shotgun blast, pulses of energy rippled outward into the Pacific, with the most intense waves targeting coastal enclaves directly in its path. Sites farther west were shielded by the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, allowing destructive waves to bypass populated cities around the Sea of Japan. Additionally, enclosed bays and inlets dampened the tsunami's fury before reaching major ports. While the updated flood maps guided the authorities' emergency plans for Kamchatka's coastal towns, developers in parts of some Russian cities discarded the warnings and threat. They believed that the old Soviet apartment blocks, crammed in the low-lying waterfronts, were all built with zero thought for tsunami resistance. Fast forward to January 1st, 2011, Japan's earthquake shook things up, and those waves traveled a whopping 8,000 kilometers, giving Russia's at-risk shores a real wake-up call. Wide-eyed spectators in Vladivostok could only watch as the harbor drained away, realizing no expert could account for nature's boundless fury. Did you know? Russians struggled to distinguish tsunami warnings and tsunami emergencies. On January 2, 2024, experts monitoring the tsunami racing toward Russia's Pacific coast grew puzzled as to why many coastal towns failed to respond to initial warnings. The reason? Most Russians in the area were unaware of the key differences between a tsunami warning versus an emergency. This vital knowledge gap meant the people did not grasp the progressive threat warnings described in the alerts blaring. A tsunami warning is like a heads-up for places that are liable to get hit soon, using earthquake data and wave models. It comes right after an earthquake to alert coastal communities to be careful. If there's a warning, folks near the coast should head inland or find a strong building 100 feet above sea level. Ports make ships leave, and everyone clears the beaches. The warning can linger for a few hours, depending on when the tsunami might actually strike. If sea level monitors confirm a dangerous tsunami wave forming and approaching land, officials can escalate the alert to a tsunami emergency. This designation indicates that observed flooding or major damage has begun or is expected imminently along the coastline. At this point where things get real, instructions will shift from preventive evacuation to emergency rescue. Rescue teams are on the move as reports pour in about serious flooding. A tsunami emergency means things are hitting hard, and the warnings are there to help areas get ready, using the data at hand. The swift transition from a tsunami warning to a tsunami emergency on January 2nd signaled that the threat offshore Japan was maturing into reality along Russia's vulnerable coastline. As shelters overflowed with anxious citizens, all eyes remained fixed on the sea to see the first enormous waves that appeared on the horizon. How the UN stands watch over Russia's vulnerable shore. As seaside towns gear up for potential tsunamis, super high-tech monitoring systems work quietly in the background to keep tabs on emerging threats worldwide. The United Nations, UN, has been a key player in getting nations to team up and create solid warning networks, especially for those in vulnerable spots. After the devastating 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, the UN stepped in and backed the setup of earthquake and tsunami alert systems in places at high risk. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, run by the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, makes sure real-time data flows between advanced monitoring stations in the US and disaster agencies across countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Simultaneously, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO oversees the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning System, covering nations like India, Thailand, Australia, and South Africa. This system, equipped with sea-level gauges, buoys, and seismic detectors, monitors unusual wave activity and models potential impacts. Deep ocean sensors can detect disturbances equivalent to just 1 centimeter of water displacement. These UN sensors all around the globe and the local control centers are not just for show, they give emergency handlers the heads up to monitor threats and issue warnings. Although these warning systems cannot prevent natural disasters, but they showed the UN's coordinating role in using shared data, skills, and technology to save lives. As Russia consulted with neighboring countries like Japan to assess the tsunami threat on January 2nd, they used these sophisticated UN-coordinated systems for data detection and wave tracking across the Pacific, helping everyone stay informed. The UN is also helping poorer nations get better warning access, making hazard monitoring more effective worldwide. The calm before the tsunami. A tense stillness enveloped Vladivostok's coastline as residents hurried to higher ground, responding to early warnings of an approaching tsunami. Despite the seismic monitoring systems providing an alert, the threat felt abstract to citizens more accustomed to stable ground. Emergency coordinators worked urgently, evacuating vulnerable fishing villages and swiftly clearing the harbors of ships. The usual urban sounds disappeared, replaced by an eerie quiet, broken only by occasional emergency sirens guiding needy residents to temporary shelters. There, nervous conversations and glances out the window revealed a common hope that the scientific predictions had exaggerated the danger, that the worst projections would prove untrue. However, the lack of activity along the shoreline delivered a clear message that no one could guarantee safety in the tsunami's path. Caution and preparation remained the only defenses against this indifferent natural force. Coastal residents placed their trust in technology, expertise, and disaster readiness, having done all that was humanly possible. With bated breath, Vladivostok awaited the sea's next move. Comment your thoughts on this warning Russia received about the massive tsunami coming their way. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one.